toughest decision you've ever made?
Toughest decision I've ever made.
Yeah.
Interesting. I would say the toughest decision I've ever made was to fire somebody, and because everything that goes with that, in business, that's never an easy thing to do, and it comes with it, a lot of emotional angst, and so that's probably the toughest decision I've ever made.
A lot of these things are going to be to bring up changing the number of school districts. A lot of the decisions are going to be difficult, obviously.
Right.
You did mention, I believe it's in your campaign material, that you have been successful in forming coalitions, reaching out to other people. I'm not making that up, am I? I have an ability to build relationships.
Right. Well, that's always
an example of that. That's where I'm headed there.
Well, I think that what has happened is during this campaign, I've been able to bring a number of people together, local leaders, to begin to build the relationship that a state representative will need to have in order to work with the communities. I've taken the time out. I've met a number of our council members in the various communities, a number of the mayors, a number of the school directors, with an eye toward being able to work together. I've been out talking with firemen as well, because they're clearly a community service that needs help from the state. Fire protection is an expensive business, and I think that that's really been one of the things I've tried to do in this process, to begin to build the relationships that we'll need to have to work together. In business, I've always been a relationship builder, and that's been kind of my strong suit. One of the times that we sat down and someone asked me to define my business relationship, I said that I am the person that I want my client to hear the bad news from. You can give them the good news, but I want to be the one that can give them the bad news, because anybody can be the good guy. You have to have a very strong relationship if anybody ever has to break bad news, and so that is one of the things I've tried to do, is to make sure that any relationships, whether they be business or personal, that I've spent enough time to invested enough time to make sure that I was the person to give the bad news. Not that I want to. I would like to give the good news, but right.
You mentioned you would be supportive of a constitutional convention, specifically as it pertains to maybe rethinking the tax structure, also possibly the size of the legislature. Are there other specific reforms that you think, legislative reforms, that you would be supportive of in terms of term limits, transparency, those types of things?
Oh, I think that one of the things we have to do is make certain that we conduct ourselves with a great deal of accountability. I mean, none of that money in Harrisburg is ours. As a taxpayer, I guess it is, but very little of that money that in Harrisburg is our own personal money. And for too long, I think that we've had a culture that treats it as other people's money. It's not. It's the taxpayers' money, and I think that what we need is greater accountability on that issue. Just in a small way, the per diem issue. It amazes me, having come from a business background, that you're allowed to walk in and say, well, I spent this, trust me. And that just, I find that just very surprising. I was never able to do that in business. When I went on a business trip, I had to actually come back with receipts. And I think that that's just, it's a small thing, but it's a thing that aggravates people. It says, if we handle the small details that way, how are we handling the big stuff? Everett Dirksen said, a billion here, a billion there. I believe it was Everett Dirksen, a billion here, a billion there. Sooner or later, you're talking about real money. The reality is that, whether it's $163 or or $1 billion, it's still real money. It's somebody's money. I would be in the situation where I would only claim for the receipts that I had. My records will be open to you. You're welcome to come down to the office at any time and view those records, as far as the expense reimbursements. I believe that, we need to be held to a higher standard. As far as term limits, I believe that they're a consideration for the leadership, because I think that what happens is we can end up with, a leadership that is kind of entrenched. And I think that I would favor, maybe a 6-year period for a maximum 6-year period for a speaker or a majority leader. Obviously, the speaker depends on which party controls the House, but normally, I think that it's good for the process to freshen things up. As far as individual legislators, excuse me, I don't believe that. Term limits are a great buzzword, and conceptually they seem like a great idea. I don't know that I'm in favor of them, because I think what happens is, if you were to put a 4 or 6 year term limit on someone, I think what you end up having is, a constant change. And who do you empower in that case? You empower the professional staff, and you empower the lobbyists, because, we'll be coming in, not knowing, which direction we should be going in, and, as far as where, just offices are located or something like that, and I think that gives too much power to the professional staff and the lobbyists. I think it gives, there's a trade-off. Term limits sound like a wonderful idea, but I think in the long run, everybody likes them for everybody else's legislator except their own.
You mentioned a couple times about the corruption that has been exposed within the last year and a half in Missouri County specifically. Is there a legislative response in Harrisburg to that? Anything that you think could be done there that would maybe diminish the possibility of this type of thing happening again in our area?
Well, I think that, I don't know that there's any specific legislative response. I think that because there's, we need to clean up our own house. It's hard to lecture somebody else when, you have your own problems. So I think that what happens is we all need to recognize that we have a higher standard that applies to us, and as a result, there may be some oversight. I mean, I don't know that, there may be some oversight, extra oversight needed of the court system here. I'm a little concerned about Governor Rendell's proposal to appoint judges as opposed to elect them. I know all the issues of politics, the argument being that, excuse me, campaign contributions, don't necessarily, good campaign contributions or large campaign contributions don't necessarily make the best judge. But the reality is, I think it's the best person. There is no guarantee that an appointive process wouldn't have delivered us the same candidates. And I think the flaw was in the person and not in the process. We saw last year that there were many candidates who spent large amounts of money that did not make it through the primary process. I think anything that disconnects the voters from the process is harmful in the end.